My phone battery is down to just 12%, and I don't know if it will last long enough, but I felt I had to record this. I'm 96 years old now. At this age, people don't ask many questions anymore. They assume the story is finished.
And there's something about marriage I've carried in my heart for decades. So with whatever battery is left, I'm going to tell you the truth I wish someone had told me long ago. At this age, people don't ask many questions anymore. They assume the story is finished, that whatever mattered has already happened, and whatever mistakes were made have already settled into silence. But there are some things that only become clear when almost everyone you knew is gone. Marriage is one of those things. And what I've come to understand about it, well, it might make some people uncomfortable. I don't say that to be cruel or bitter. I had a long life, a full one in many ways. But there are truths that sit quietly in a person for decades before they're ready to be spoken. I was 22 when I got married. That was 1952. In those days, a woman didn't spend much time wondering if marriage was the right choice. It was simply the next step in the path that had been laid out. You finished school. You found a good man. You started a home. And if you were lucky, you built a life together. His name was Thomas. Tom was steady, reliable, the kind of man everyone trusted. My parents liked him immediately, which meant something back then. He worked at a hardware supply company, wore pressed shirts even on weekends. He wasn't loud or romantic, but he was decent. And at 22, decency felt like enough. We didn't have some grand love story. There were no sweeping gestures, no letters written in the middle of the night. Just dinners, conversations on front porches, and the quiet understanding that this was the man I would grow old beside. Looking back now, I realize something. I didn't marry Tom because I couldn't live without him. I married him because life seemed easier with him. That difference, it's small when you're young, but it grows over time, like a crack in a sidewalk that slowly widens every winter. The first few years were busy. We bought a small house, nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen with yellow linoleum floors. I still remember the smell of fresh paint when we first moved in. Tom worked long hours. I kept the house, and eventually we had children, 2 boys. Life filled itself with routines, breakfast, school lunches, laundry, paying bills, neighbors coming over for coffee. From the outside, we looked like a good marriage, and in many ways, we were. There were no screaming fights, no doors slammed in anger, no terrible betrayals. Just 2 people doing what they believed responsible adults were supposed to do. But there's something about quiet marriages that people don't talk about. Loneliness can live inside them very comfortably. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It just sits there, year after year. Tom and I were partners, good partners. We ran a household together, raised children together, paid the mortgage together. But somewhere along the way, we stopped truly seeing each other. Maybe we never really started. It's hard to say now. I remember evenings when he'd come home tired, loosen his tie, sit down in his chair and turn on the television. I'd be in the kitchen washing dishes. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we wouldn't. And somehow that became normal. Not cold, not hostile, just quiet. Years passed like that. Decades, really. The boys grew up and left home. That's what children do. And when they did, something strange happened in the house. The silence got louder. It's an odd thing. When a home is full of children, you think the noise is exhausting. But when they're gone, you realize that noise was life itself. Tom and I sat across from each other at the dinner table again, just the two of us. And that's when I began to notice something I had been too busy to see before. We had built a life together, but we hadn't built much of a connection. We knew each other's habits, but not each other's inner worlds. I knew how he liked his eggs, but I didn't know what he feared most. He knew how I organized the pantry, but I don't think he knew what made me feel most alive. Does that make sense? You can live beside someone for 40 years and still never quite reach them. Marriage makes that possible. That's the uncomfortable part people don't like hearing. They believe time equals closeness, but time only magnifies what's already there. If intimacy isn't growing, distance quietly is. There was a moment when the truth came to me clearly. I was 73. Tom was 75. He had a heart attack one morning while trimming the hedge in the yard. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. No final speech, no long goodbye. Just a sudden collapse. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. I remember sitting in the hospital room afterward. A nurse handed me his watch and wallet in a small plastic bag. 49 years of marriage, reduced to a watch and a wallet. People came to the funeral. Friends, neighbors, old coworkers, everyone said the same thing. You two had such a good life together. And I nodded politely, because in many ways we did. But that night, when the house was empty again, I sat in Tom's chair in the living room, and I realized something that shook me more than his death. I didn't actually know who he had been in his deepest self. Not completely. And he probably didn't know me either. We had shared time, but we hadn't shared enough truth. That realization stayed with me. Still does. It wasn't that our marriage was bad. It was simply incomplete. Two decent people doing their best, but always assuming there would be more time to talk deeply, more time to ask real questions, more time to sit together without rushing to the next task. And then suddenly, time was gone. That's the quiet danger inside marriage. People think the commitment guarantees closeness, but commitment without attention slowly turns into distance. You wake up one day sitting across from a stranger you care about, and you don't quite know how that happened. I don't blame Tom, and I don't blame myself. We lived in a time when people weren't taught to speak about feelings. You worked, you provided, you stayed loyal. That was considered success. But loyalty alone doesn't build intimacy. Presence does. Curiosity does. Honesty does. Those things require effort and courage. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if we had asked each other more questions. Real questions. What are you afraid of? What do you regret? What did you dream about when you were young? Simple things. But we were always busy being responsible. Responsible people postpone conversations like that. They assume there will be a better moment later. Later is a dangerous word. Later quietly turns into never. Now at 96, most of the people who knew Tom are gone. The boys are old men themselves. And the house we built together was sold many years ago. What remains are memories. Some warm, some complicated. But one truth stands above the rest. Marriage is not something you build once. It's something that must be rebuilt thousands of times, in small conversations, in moments of attention, in choosing to look up from the routine and really see the person beside you. If you don't, life will still move forward. Bills will get paid. Children will grow. Holidays will come and go. And from the outside, everything will look perfectly fine. But inside, two lives can slowly drift apart without anyone noticing, until one day There's no more time left to close the distance. I loved Tom in my own quiet way. I believe he loved me too. But love, I've learned, is not the same thing as knowing someone. And knowing someone takes a kind of courage we didn't always have. So if you're listening to an old woman who has lived almost a century, here is the uncomfortable truth. Marriage doesn't protect you from loneliness, not automatically. It only gives you the opportunity to prevent it. And opportunities, like time, disappear faster than you think. I'm not saying don't marry. I'm saying don't assume the ring will do the work for you. Look at the person beside you. Ask them who they really are. Tell them who you really are, even if it feels awkward, even if it feels late. Because one day you will sit in a quiet room holding someone's watch and wallet, and you will wish you had asked just one more question. At 96, there isn't much left ahead of me. Just quiet days, tea in the morning, the slow movement of sunlight across the floor. I think about Tom sometimes when the house is very still. Not with anger, not with regret exactly, just a soft sadness for two young people who thought they had forever. If what I've said here means something to you, then maybe it wasn't too late for everyone.